time to discuss for loops. Now, for loops are my favorite type of loop because they're nice and compact. You can do the whole loop in one statement. So we start with for, and then within the for statement, we actually have three parts. The first part is the initialization of the loop. In there, we declare the loop counter. So we're going to start counting at 0. So we declare the variable I, which is commonly used for iterator, and we assign that the initial value of 0 because that's where we start counting. The next part of the loop is the continuation condition. The continuation condition basically allows us to continue iterating until that condition is no longer true, or that condition evaluates as false. So we'll say I is less than 101. And then the final part of the loop is the counter. And the counter specifically is how are we going to count in the loop. So I'll set that to I++, since we're going to increment by 1. All right, then I'll simply document write I plus a break. And that's the whole loop right there, just like that. Very compact, very easy. You just got to remember the three distinct parts. First part of the loop is the initialization, separated by a semicolon from the continuation condition, and the loop will continue to iterate while this is true. And then you have the counter, I++. All right, so let's take a look at this. Let me make sure I saved. I did. Let's take a look at this in the local browser here within our Komodo text editor. And there are our values 0 to 100. Now, if I wanted to count backwards from 100 to 0, it's just a matter of changing the loop values here. Oops, I is greater than -1 because we want to count all the way down to 0. See, I almost made the one-off error there. And we're going to do an I minus minus. All right, so now we count from from 100 down to 0. Very easy. Now, if we wanted to count by fives, we could simply set this to I equals I minus 5. And once we do that, the loop now counts backwards by 5, 95, 90, 85, 80, etc. So this counter here is really important in determining how we go through the loop. Now, a couple of dangers. It's easy to accidentally make a loop that allows us to iterate forever. It's called an endless loop, and it's a common error. The problem is an endless loop is likely to crash the user's browser. That's not exactly a good user experience. So we want to avoid creating something like this. Var I equals 0, so we'll start counting at 0. Our continuation condition is I is greater than 0 and I++. This loop would go on forever because we start counting at 0, and then the continuation condition is I is greater than 0, and we count by 1. So first time through the loop, oops, this should be greater than or equal to 0. So first time through the loop, I is 0. Is I greater than or equal to 0? Is 0 greater than or equal to 0? You bet. Then we add 1. 1 greater than or equal to 0? You bet. We continue. 2, 3. So there's no way to get out of this loop. So this is known as an endless loop. We don't want to do this because this can cause a browser to crash and generally is not what we want. There's very specific situations in programming where you might use an endless loop, but generally not in JavaScript. So avoid your endless loops. Now let's also look at a practical way to use a loop. And for this, I'm going to use the for loop. So I'm going to create just a new file from the template here, and I'm going to call this looping input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine a loop with the prompt. And we're going to get several inputs from the user. Looping input. So in the body, of course, we'll start with my script tags. Type equals text / JavaScript. All right, now I'm going to close up the little browser for testing here within the Komodo text editor. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say while UI, which stands for user input, is not equal to XXX, we're going to prompt the user with UI equals prompt, and here we'll prompt the user with enter a name of one of your favorite bands, enter XXX to stop. Oops, let's make this consistent in casing, just like that. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I forgot to declare UI. That's important. So var UI, and I'll initially set that to a blank string. So we'll document write UI plus a break. So we're just going to output them back. Later we'll do a little more with one of these looped inputs. So again, how this is going to work. We declare a variable called UI. We set it to blank. Our loop says while UI is not equal to XXX, we're going to do what's between the curly brackets. So in this case, we're going to prompt the user, enter a name of one of your favorite bands, enter XXX to stop. We're going to put whatever's in the prompt in UI, and then we're going to write it out. So if the user enters XXX, that means we're going to stop looping. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll save, and let's try this in one of our regular browsers. Go ahead and do this in Firefox. There we go. Okay, enter a name of one of your favorite bands, enter XXX to stop. Journey. REO Speedwagon. You probably like different bands than I do. Styx. Foreigner. Yes, I like bands from 20 years ago, but most of them are still touring. America. Heart. XXX. Now, this worked fine, except the problem is our little XXX still appeared here. So I'm going to make one modification to the code to make this a slightly better program. And I'm going to add an if statement here. If UI is not equal to XXX, then we'll output what the user types in. Otherwise, we won't. So what this does, this just prevents the XXX, which is used to terminate the loop from the user's perspective, from getting output. All right, let's try it one more time. Bring up the browser. We'll refresh. There we go. All right, favorite band. Let's do Kansas. 30 Seconds to Mars. There's a contemporary one. The Police. Rolling Stones. And XXX. So now the XXX does not get output. So there you've got a practical application of a loop.